Hello everyone, good morning. Welcome back to the channel. I'm not sure if you saw my last few videos about keyword selection and video editors, and also the different graphic design software. But today I'm going to be talking you through a bit of a different topic, which is like the digital hustle. There's a lot of talk in the industry about the space being overcrowded and lots of gimmicks and scams. I don't know if scams is quite the right word, but there's certainly a lot of courses out there and people encouraging other people to get involved in digital marketing, and everybody sees it as like the future with AI agents and working from home and stuff. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about that and about some of the things you can do to increase your chances and also reduce the risk of failure. So let's crack on. Okay, so there's a couple of different things which are driving this tech stroke digital revolution. In no particular order, I'm going to kind of skim through them if you like. So first one is rising smartphone use. Now obviously it's global, everyone's using smartphones. Even in Africa, people are using smartphones, but it's more concentrated in particular Asian countries, particularly places like India, emerging economies, China, Southeast Asia, all over Europe. Everyone's using smartphones. If you Google it, you'll find that most people actually access the internet through smartphones. Because everyone's got them in the pocket, everyone's on the move. I carry mine around in a car and all in my pocket, so it's the normal thing. So there's other things as well. There's like a lot of cheap tools and free courses. I'm sure every time you've logged onto Facebook or signed into X or LinkedIn, maybe not so much LinkedIn, but certainly Facebook and Instagram and places like that, there's a lot of sponsored content, people peddling courses, get trained in digital marketing, 6-week course. Some of the courses are free. There's a number of different providers like Google Digital Garage. There's some other providers called Coursera, I believe, and a number of others. I'll try to put some of them in the description for you. And these all kind of, incentivize people to get trained because they believe that once they get the certificate, they're going to be able to find well-paid work from home, possibly working in their pajamas. That was a joke. So look, it is a bit overcrowded, and it's been like this for the last few years, and this is why it's all the more important to kind of become a little bit kind of more refined in what your skill set is. Think of a hospital. Think how many different departments are in a hospital. And people might get trained to join the medical profession, but if you get trained in a particular field which is constantly in demand and quite well paid, that's going to stand you in good stead. And the same is true of like marketing. I've been working in the sector for quite a while. However, I'll freely admit I don't know everything there is to know because I think that's impossible. That's why people specialize in certain areas. So look, some other things driving it as well. So young digital professionals, hungry for skills. People, depending on where you live, say for example if you live in India or Southeast Asia, or one of the emerging economies in Africa, and the same is true in Europe. People are constantly on the lookout for new opportunities to work from home, work on a hybrid basis, so maybe one day a week or a month in the office and that type of thing. And that's also on the rise. There has been a bit of a decrease of it since the global COVID pandemic, but it's still quite popular. And there are some companies which have like a remote first policy. If you look at the Remote Working Foundation website, I believe that's what it's called, there's a list of companies which are all remote first. I'll freely admit, I like to work remotely. I believe that you have a lot more freedom, a lot more incentive. You're incentivized a lot more to do well and keep the job because you have that freedom and you can work from wherever you want to. I spent a couple of years in Spain. I was getting paid from London, and yeah, it's fantastic. So look, there's some more reasons for things that are driving it. So data visualization, there's a lot of I'm looking at my list and talking to you. There's a lot of basically digital maps, basically, which highlight skill shortages in certain areas, and of the marketing field, and ultimately, how can I describe this the best way? Certainly in the last 2 to 3 years, maybe the last five plus more years, there's been a huge increase in many people wanting to become a creator, whatever that might mean. So that could mean, TikTok success, Instagram success, LinkedIn success, YouTube success. Now, I did recently make a video about this not so long ago, about people who had a lot of subscribers on some of these platforms. In some cases had 1 million subscribers, and they weren't able to monetize it. So always kind of keep a focus on where your money comes from. It's going to be different for everybody. And the idea that you've got a lot of fans, followers, connections, friends, whatever you want to call it, and that's going to kind of be a guaranteed cash cow revenue generator is not true. You need to have a strategy. And it's going to be different for everybody. It's going to be different based on your age, your skills, your abilities, where you live, what's in demand where you live. It's not a one size fits all. So just bear in mind, what's going to fly off the shelf, what's going to make you the money, because, you could be spending all your week trying to get followers and subscribers, and that might not generate you the revenue. Now for me, I've got my fingers in different pies. As I say, this is my sort of sector. It has been for over 10 years, and this helps me to win more contracts, either working freelance or working contractually with different companies. And one thing I love about it is, I'm not tied to companies that are locally. I can, with Microsoft Teams and Zoom and Google Meets and stuff, you can work with companies from all across the UK, Northern Ireland, even the European Union, sometimes America. So and further afield than that, in Asia and stuff. So I'm always open to that, and that's why it kind of works for me, because it doubles up as like a kind of self-promo machine without making it sound like that's the only reason why I'm on there. It gives me a chance to add some value to some of the kind of aspiring people who are looking to get into digital marketing from emerging economies, or middle income economies, or where there's a lot of young people, professionals, and the digital economies are starting to take off. So that's kind of why I'm on it. But just bear that in mind, because I do feel that a lot of people globally, actually, just think about getting subscribers on TikTok or LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever, and that's going to make them money. And it's not true. You need a strategy, and you need a very kind of refined, honed skill set in order to pull that off. Okay, so just picking up on what I was saying a minute ago, if you'd like my take on some of the things which are definitely not working, because not everything's in demand, not everything's working, I'll tell you what I think some of them are. So, I kind of touched on one of them in the last segment of the video I just filmed a minute ago. Overhyped courses, basically, people promising Canva success, 99p courses to learn Canva. I think that's a load of nonsense, to be honest, and it's very easy to use. Anybody can pick it up. Any company that's, whether it's a one-man band or a small to medium-sized business, they've almost certainly got somebody who knows how to use Canva. The idea that you're going to do like a Canva course and be there, knight in shining armor, and ride in there and, turn the company around with Canva graphics and stuff is a nonsense, So that's one of the things which I think doesn't work. There's a lot of generic tools with no kind of real world context, So when I say generic tools, for example, a lot of tools or SaaS platforms that are done very, very well, they have a very defined target market, and they're quite specialist. A good example of that could be something that records a video like the one I'm making now into different languages using AI, with almost simplicity and ease, as opposed to something which might throw up some keywords, because there's many platforms around which will throw up keywords for free. So that's what I mean by generic tools. So if you're focusing on generic tools or learning generic tools or universal generic tools, which have no real world sort of context, or maybe it was mass duplication or something like that, then that's doomed to failure almost certainly. Another thing that doesn't work is like low-paying gigs, so these kind of really, I don't do them, these like really small jobs on Fiverr.com, I will design you a logo for like £15 and stuff like that, but that's almost a waste of time. I refuse to do stuff like that. I always go for the contract work. When I say the contract work, it's never like 1-2 weeks, but the longer term stuff like a 12-month contract, or it might be like a maternity leave contract for a marketing manager or something like that. And I do that, and I find that's quite well paid. Generally it's not less, the advertised rates are not less than 38-40k, to be honest. And often it's more than that. If you're just doing these like little jobs on these platforms, there's lots of them. Fiverr.com is one, freelancer.com and others. It's very short-term work. The rates are not great. The income's not reliable enough. It's difficult to plan your life around it. So that's something which I think is not really a viable long-term solution. No, and I totally get why people do it. If you're in a remote area, or if you've got limited work opportunities, then maybe you've got no choice in the short term. So I get that completely. But maybe just look at some other sites. There are other job sites. When I say job sites, they do like these digital marketing contracts and stuff. I'll put some of them in the description for you. Have a look through. Whichever country you're from, as long as it's like an English speaking country or you speak English, theoretically I can't see why you would not benefit from looking at those, because they're fully remote. 99% of them are fully remote. So what else? So like another thing that doesn't work is what I describe as the subscription fatigue model. People getting fatigued with subscriptions. When it first started, all these SaaS platforms, the idea was people would pay a subscription, and every month recurring subscription, or every quarter or whatever. But because everybody's doing that now, because the industry is becoming so fragmented, all these different platforms, if you're not careful, you can have 25 subscriptions going out a month, just to enable you to do something which maybe isn't making you the money, so if that ends up costing you more just to have those subscriptions, and you're not actually making 4 times that amount, then maybe, or certainly 3 times that amount, you need to be asking yourself questions. Why have I got a subscription to Artlist or Epidemic Sound, or why have I got a subscription to Adobe Express, or why have I got a subscription to Adobe Photoshop? Because if that's not making you money week in, week out, it's one thing getting an odd job in, but if it's not making you sustainable, decent income, then maybe you need to be looking at that and thinking, well, there's too many, it's an overcrowded space, there's too many people doing it, there's not enough work security. Maybe you need to be looking at doing something else. We're looking at sustainability marketing. That's a growing thing. But there are other areas as well. AI is a big thing. AI agents. You see, that's another thing. With AI agents, in sort of, they're around now, but 2, 3, 4 years time, there might be even more of them around, which are capable of doing the jobs that digital marketers have been doing so far. So you need to be very specialised and looking to specialise in a certain area to succeed. This is what I truly believe. If you're maybe like a marketing manager, maybe you're a bit more immune from it, because marketing managers deal with many different areas of marketing, not just one. So by that I mean, if you're a marketing manager, a freelancer, otherwise, you probably don't just get like a short gig in for 2 weeks. You're on a contract for 12 months, 2 years, or whatever it is, and you're managing a marketing department and team and all the assets and stuff. So that's completely different, and the rates for that are quite good, especially in the US. So yeah, subscription fatigue. One other thing is like, marketing is regionalized, right? So obviously I'm from the UK, so I've got like a kind of Western viewpoint on marketing. However, whichever part of the world you're in as a marketer, you need to be able to translate marketing strategy into different regions. So what works in the West doesn't necessarily work guaranteed in say Asia or the US, so things are done slightly differently in Europe to how they are in the US. There's a lot of similarities there, but certainly when you start marketing in Asia, particularly to China or other Asian countries, you start hitting all these cultural differences with the way things are done, and language barriers and cultural norms and stuff, and people are using different platforms. If you just go to Google, type in what platforms are people using in Southeast Asia or the whole of Asia as a whole, and it's going to be completely different to what people are using in the West. So people are using different platforms, and if you're based in Asia, you could be based in Southeast Asia, Philippines, you could be based in India, you could be based in China, you could be based in the Middle East, you could be based in Africa. But if you're targeting Western companies and the companies in like the United States or the UK, then you need to be kind of studying and finding out, what do companies in those areas, those regions use to market their products, because it's going to be different from, say, a company in Thailand or a company in the Philippines or a company in India. I mean, it's going to be different, Sure, there'll be some crossover, some similarities, but going to be different. So you need to be up to date and up to speed with what companies are using and how they're marketing their products and services in the regions that you're looking to win the contracts. And I think some of the challenges which kind of people face is like lack of mentorship and lack of quality training, because there are so many free courses about nowadays, and I'm sure you'll appreciate there's a difference in getting a certificate from, say, the Digital Marketing Institute to like a free course on Google Digital Garage. It doesn't carry the same weight, So some of them are free, some of them are paid, but I do think that's one of the things that maybe holds people back. A kind of mentorship program or something along those lines from somebody who's right up there, in an established company and making the money and can help to put people on the right track and stuff. So I think there's a lot of confusion with the career paths. I touched on this briefly earlier. Everyone's saying get into digital marketing, but it's such a big area. So unless you've done a lot of research into what you're good at, what makes the money now, what but for example, the area of marketing you're looking to get into, what that's going to look like in 5-10 years time, because there's always like geopolitical factors and things change in business, macroeconomics, things change. So you need to be skilled or looking to get skilled in something which is going to stand the test of time, rather than, I'll give you an example about 10 years ago it was all about the graphics, right? Everyone wanted to post to Facebook, post to Instagram, post to LinkedIn, post a nice little graphic and stuff. But see, that's all changed now, because which is what I mean. AI can do this stuff in a blink of an eye. And if you don't want to use AI, you can get to Canva. There's a free version and a Canva Pro. Canva Pro is really cheap, £100 a year, so £10 a month. If you pay per year, it's £10 a month. If you pay per month, I think it's about £13.99, something like that. But look, the point is, it's really cheap. If you use AI, it's really cheap or free as well, and you can get often better results very, very quickly. So it's completely changed. And also with AI agents, they're capable of doing this stuff as well. So the idea that you're going to be sitting at home waiting for like a if I can call it like a booking, from a company to design like a little graphic for their website, it's not going to happen. The really big companies that make millions, they've got people in the house doing it, or very well paid, agencies, charge many thousands of pounds. But this is what I'm saying, these little small gig jobs on Fiverr.com, it's like I don't want to be rude, but it's almost like a waste of time. $15 to $20 for a graphic, and it's hard to make money out. It's hard to make a living. Wherever you live in the world, I'm sure you'd appreciate it's not a lot of money, which is why I think having like a solid skill and going for a long-term contract work is going to stand you in much better stead. So yeah, some other points here. So language and cultural barriers, I think I've touched on this. So like, especially in countries like India, I mean, there's like quite a few variations of like the language, Tamil, and, I don't know them all because I'm not Indian, but there's quite a few different dialects and variations of the languages. You know, and you'll find that there's demand in some areas, but they want it in a certain language, because India's a huge country, like China as well. You know, and you know, Southeast Asia, there's different languages. Thai is not the same as Cambodian, and Filipino is not the same as Cambodia. You see what I mean? So, right. So what else we got here? So, yeah, I mean, I suppose the thing to be aware of is like sort of peer pressure, burnout, and mental health. You know, like, you know, in all sectors, but it happens in marketing as well. There's always this peer pressure to succeed, and you can end up working so many hours. And I've done it myself. You know, I'm a bit wiser now, but you know, quite a few years ago, you know, I used to be working all hours and, you know, trying to get things over the line and, you know, get that promotion, get that sale, get that deal and stuff. And then I realised that, you know, actually, you know, my health was taking a toll. Although I'm very lucky in my health, you know, I don't suffer from anything. But what I'm saying is, you can burn yourself out, you know, mentally, physically, you know, to the point where, you know, you can overdo things and potentially put your health at risk. And what I realised from that is, you know, to kind of work smarter. You know, be smart, work smarter, not harder. You know, so, you know, you use things like AI to do your research. You know, there's tons and tons of platforms, not just ChatGPT, but tons of other ones. Use AI to do your research. You know, it's a lot quicker than going through encyclopedias or asking friends or doing surveys and standing in shopping centres and stuff. Use AI to do your research about, you know, what's popular, what's going to be popular in the future, what makes money, what doesn't, and then refine it, refine your search manually and maybe using AI as well, and just kind of focus on, or try and find what's going to work. You know, there is a lot of peer pressure, and, you know, I don't think everyone who puts in all those hours, you know, 50 hours a week, succeeds, because you've got to have the right strategy. One of the most common things that happens in the UK is a lot of businesses don't have the right business model. So there's all this rage about digital marketing and having the strategies and, you know, recruiting staff who, you know, about GA4 and, you know, various analytics platforms, and, you know, must have knowledge of SEMrush, Moz Majestic, all that kind of stuff. You know, some of the adverts are quite funny. They sort of say, must know your difference between your cost per acquisition, CPM, which is, you know, per 1,000 views, all these different metrics, cost per click, blah, 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 blah. I could go on and on. But, you know, ultimately, the flaw there is, as in not the flaw as in a flaw, but FLAW, the flaw as in fault, is, you know, the business models are often not right. So that's why the companies aren't making the money. You know, the marketing, digital marketing in any sector is like the icing on the cake. It's like, think of it as rocket boosters on a business model that makes money and works already. But the truth is, I can tell you this now, in England, you know, many companies, yes, they have a business model. They might be turning over money, you know, they might have staff, but the business model perhaps isn't strong enough, you know, and for that reason they're always thinking there's a problem with the marketing, but actually the real problem's with the business model, you know, and you can see that because when you look at some companies with a really great business model, they make a lot of money, and maybe they don't need a lot of digital marketing, you know, maybe they have sales teams that pick up the phone or send emails. To be honest, I've always found that you know, just sort of going back to basics a bit, I've always found that some principles always remain the same, which is, you know, in business is about building relationships, sorry. So maybe that means, you know, picking up the phone, sending an email, or, you know, using an email automation sequence or something along those lines, just to kind of, you know, build relationships. And, you know, everyone's always banging on about HubSpot, as, you know, again, this happens in the UK a lot. I'd say 7 out of 10 of the employers always put in the adverts must have HubSpots, and it's a load of nonsense, because I'm not saying HubSpot's bad, but there's other platforms out there as well. For example, look at gohighlevel.com. Now that's like £100 a year, and it's got fantastic results. You know, look at the reviews on Trustpilot, you know, amazing. So, and there are many other CRMs out there as well, where you can achieve great things and great success and great functionality. What I'm saying nicely, and I'm not kind of ganging up on HubSpot, but the idea that you need HubSpot or you're going to fail is not true. There's other platforms out there. Check out gohighlevel.com. You know, that certainly can do some of the stuff, some of your email automations, but there are other platforms out there as well. If you look through my videos, you'll find one about where I talk about the various CRMs. I'm sure there's loads more. I just went through 10 of them, but that's my point. There's always more. There's always more choice, more options, and I'm just trying to encourage you to think outside of the box and not just be blinkered by what employers tell you. You know, employer could be, like an organisation. It could be a company. It could be a charity. You know, putting out a job on a freelancer site, or it could be an actual job or a contract. But you know, what they say isn't always correct. You know, it's called being blinded by their vision. So they think they know what they want, but a lot of the time we don't really fully understand what they need, if that makes sense, you know. So yeah. So what else we got here? So yeah, so accessibility to paid tools, especially in sort of rural, small town areas. I mean, that's true. You know, maybe you know, the internet connections aren't great there. You know, maybe, you know, the payment systems aren't great if you live in a very rural, remote area in somewhere in the middle of India. Let's say, I've just said, not picking on India, I'm just saying, for example. So, you know, it's good to, you know, it could be middle of China, not necessarily India, you know, or middle of Thailand. So yeah, it's true that you need to have a decent internet connection, and you need to, you know, have some couple of different payment methods. You know, like sort of, you know, Google Pay or, you know, PayPal. That doesn't work for everything. Not everybody accepts PayPal, you know, so it's good to have like you know, some kind of debit or credit card, you know, even if it's something like Monzo, just so you can make those payments for the subscriptions and the things you need to pay for to get these jobs done. So yeah, just moving on. I mean, I'd say just focus on the niche, you know. So obviously I'm not talking about niche for YouTube videos, but I'm talking about the niche, you know, what you're going to specialize in, because, you know, there's so many people wanting to work from home, and it's become a bit kind of generic, if I can say it like that, you know. And the same is true in England. You know, there's a multitude of people who are maybe skilled in the lower end of digital marketing. So by that I mean, you know, graphics on Canva and Adobe Express and that type of thing. But when it comes to, you know, maybe being like a full-blown marketing manager, or, you know, being like a PPC specialist, maybe they haven't got those skills. You know, if you ask some of these people, you know, about quality score, they probably wouldn't know what that was. I'm not saying that about everybody, but I'm just saying that, you know, the most common form of digital marketing, like I'm talking for the UK, is things like sort of storytelling and, you know, simple graphics, posting to Instagram, posting to Facebook. But the growth area in the future is not going to be that. It's not, you know, because with AI and AI agents and climate change, you know, companies are thinking about sustainability marketing. They're thinking about automation, so email automation campaigns, you know, whether it's a drip campaign or email automation campaign. And in sort of 5-10 years time, we might be having another conversation, because these things change, you see. So it might not be about that. It's constantly changing, and you've got to have your finger on the pulse, and see what's coming up, see what's coming on the crest of a wave, you know, in terms of change. You know, and I think a lot of people from my country, UK, don't really do that very successfully. You know, they just kind of focus on Instagram and storytelling and simple graphics, and you need more of that. Like, video is great, you know, because it's, you know, that's why I got into YouTube. I think AI can do some things, but I don't think AI can do everything. But I can do making a custom video on, you know, YouTube, whether it's me filming like a marketing vlog, or filming, you know, a hotel video or a travel vlog, or some other kind of corporate video. You know, I don't think AI can do that well. I'm almost certain, but at the moment it can't. So that's what I got into YouTube. It's more interactive. People enjoy it more. It draws people in. So, okay, so just I think I've covered the main points I wanted to cover in the video. Really, just go over what you're trying to achieve, and look at, you know, what the future holds in terms of future growth, future pay. You know, look at things like, you know, your own skill set and your age and your location, and the type of clients which you might be able to win contracts from. So I'll leave that one there. I have talked for quite a while. Thank you for listening. I'll make another video again soon. I don't make videos every day or even every week because I've got other stuff to do, but I will try and make another one within the next 2 weeks. So thanks again for listening, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.